What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another very exciting episode right here on the MIgardener channel. It's kind of a cold, dreary, rainy day in the garden today, but it's a great day to talk about cover crops. At the end of the year, this topic comes up a lot. Luke, which cover crop do you recommend? Or, Luke, I got my hands on this cover crop. Is it a good one? And so we're going to talk about all the different cover crops that are available to you as a gardener and which ones I like. Because there are definite ones that I find to be my favorite, but also I will say my favorite does not have to be your favorite. And that's why we're going to kind of compare and contrast, give the pros and cons to all of them, or most of them I should say, so that you can kind of find out one that you might like. Because at the end of this video, you might like the ones that I like for the reasons that I like them, but you might also like something else as well. So I like to always leave the door open because gardening is not a one-size-fits-all solution. So with that being said, let's go. So the first most common cover crop are actually legumes. We have here these beans. The beans are nearing the end of their life, so I just pulled this one out for an example here. But beans are a great cover crop because of the fact that they actually will fix nitrogen. Now, it's a common misconception that beans will fix nitrogen in the soil throughout the growing season. They in fact produce very, very little nitrogen actually in the soil. So a lot of people want to companion plant them next to nitrogen hogging plants, thinking that the nitrogen these beans produce will actually feed the plants, when in fact it's not necessarily true. The nitrogen the plants produce is actually used to fruit and flower, and then the remaining plant is actually then tilled in, and that's where the nitrogen benefit can actually be found. You see, legumes actually have nitrogen fixing bacteria known as rhizobium, and rhizobium will actually attach to the roots. And what you'll see are these little balls. You see the little ball right there? You see the little ball? See the little cute little ball right there? That cute little ball is actually a rhizobium colony, and it actually attaches to plant roots and fixes nitrogen from the air to the plant. It's a great way to grow because it actually gives you net positive nitrogen without actually bringing in any resources. It's a plant that you can grow in depleted soil that then takes nitrogen from the air and then actually fixes it in the ground, or takes nitrogen from rain and fixes it in the air. Or fixes it to the roots and in the plant. So it's a great cover crop. And to be fair, it's a one that a lot of farmers use because of the fact that it's a multi-purpose crop. Things like soybeans, right? Soybeans are a legume, and it allows you to have basically a cash crop that you can sell for soy products, but then also you can then turn the plant back into the soil, and it gives you great seasonal, basically seasonal growing ability. Beans are not the only nitrogen fixer though. Beans do make a great cover crop, but there's another cover crop that is equally as amazing, and that's clover. Now, clover can fix nitrogen just like beans can, but they grow much lower to the ground and can grow through much hardier weather. So you can plant them in late fall, even after you plant your beans, and they'll still have time to grow, and then you'll just till them in the spring. Clover also can provide food for pollinators like honeybees, which is awesome in early spring. And then lastly, when you're looking at overall the ability for the plant to break down, clover will break down much faster than beans can. So clover, though it's a little bit more expensive, the seed is, it can actually give you kind of a net positive benefit over beans. So they make a wonderful cover crop, but that's another good example of just another nitrogen fixer that a lot of people will turn to for a cover crop. The third cover crop that's available to you is actually known as hairy vetch. Now, hairy vetch is like a tall, stringy plant. It's kind of like in the pea family. I don't exactly know what family of crop that it's in, but it is also another nitrogen fixer. It will fix nitrogen in the roots. The problem is it goes to seed very easily. And so that's why a lot of fields will actually have hairy vetch, because when it goes to seed, it'll spread its seed and then it regrows. So in the garden, it can be a little bit of a challenge, but if you're growing a large garden plot, hairy vetch is something that's fairly inexpensive because of just how readily it goes to seed. And so a lot of places will sell bulk hairy vetch that you can just spread on your garden. And again, if you're just going to till that in the spring, it's fine. But it'll also fix nitrogen in the ground. Now, on the topic of kind of a more unique cover crop like hairy vetch, there's also sunflowers. Sunflowers are a cover crop. Did you know that? That's because they produce tons of biomass. Biomass, not necessarily nitrogen, they produce biomass, which is actually organic matter. The organic material that they produce will then be turned into compost if they're mulched up and turned back into the soil. That's why a lot of farmers will plant like a big field of sunflowers, because when they're turned in and they're actually rototilled in, they can actually produce a ton of organic matter, which helps to loosen the soil, fluff the soil, and add nutrients back to the soil. Now, they don't add a net benefit. There's not like more nitrogen given. They usually just kind of help the soil quality. So they're not going to give nitrogen like beans will, because of the fact that they take nitrogen to grow and there's no nitrogen fixed on the roots. So whatever nitrogen was in the soil will be in the soil, but what there will be that there wasn't is organic material. So that's another really good cover crop. The only downside is in the home garden is they tend to be kind of difficult to mulch up. If you've got like a lawnmower or something like that, you kind of can, but they get to be a little bit difficult because they're really thick stemmed and they're kind of challenging to break up. So not my overall first preference, but it's a good cover crop, especially if you're looking for something that's beautiful, helps pollinators, and provides a ton of biomass. The next cover crop is one that you might not have thought of before, and that's root crops. Root crops farmers have been using for decades to actually aerate their soil. Now, like sunflowers and like hairy vetch, they don't really provide a whole ton of nutrients to their soil, more biomass than anything. But when it comes to root crops, what they do is they aerate the soil to actually help prevent compaction. What you'll do is in the fall, you'll plant things like turnips or radishes, carrots even. A lot of farmers will just grow these crops in their fields and they won't harvest them. The reason why they won't harvest them is because they want the nutrients back in their soil, but they want to keep the aeration. And so they simply just grow them, and then in the spring, they will just let them rot and decompose, and then they'll till them in. And where that carrot is a big air gap that will then help to aerate the soil and prevent the compaction. The next cover crop that a lot of farmers use is winter rye. Now, winter rye is basically a ryegrass that's planted in the fall and acts as a biomass source. So what you do is you'd grow the winter rye, you'd harvest it in like late spring, early summer for the oats itself. You can actually make a grain with it, which is awesome. And then the remaining biomass can be turned back into the soil. Downside to that is it's fairly weedy. It's going to spread a lot of ryegrass throughout your garden. If you don't get it all, it's going to spread, it's going to continue to grow, and it's kind of difficult to fully eradicate, unless of course you're very diligent about it. It also does not provide any additional nutrients, and in fact, if you harvest the grain for like a grain source, you're going to have to supplement with additional nitrogen because of the fact that the grain is actually a harvest that you're taking off of the premise. And so whatever you turn in is going to be slightly less amounts of nutrients than what was there originally. And then the final cover crop that's available to you is a cover crop mix. And this is one that contains things like clover, hairy vetch, might have some parsnips, some turnips and things like that, and there's some root crops as well. And those are crops that are going to give you an overall blend. So you have some aeration with some nitrogen fixers, with some biomass producers, and it's going to give you kind of an overall blend. And I really like that as well. Now, the benefit to that is you're going to have kind of a smorgasbord of everything. The downside to that, though, is you're going to have a smorgasbord of everything, and not everything can grow next to everything. It's going to kind of outcompete. It's going to be kind of messy. So just weigh your pros and cons. But those are all the cover crops, or most of the cover crops that are going to be available to you. With that, I want to jump to some of the ones that I prefer and why I like them most. So when it comes to cover crops, I don't actually use them in the garden a whole lot. And the reason why is because I tend to cover my garden with things like leaf mulch or semi-finished compost. I talked about this a lot, that I like to work smarter, not harder. And so for me, I have a ton of biomass that comes from leaves on trees or comes from, my compost pile. And I can use that as a cover that helps to protect the soil. It helps prevent erosion, nutrient loss, things like leaching and whatnot. It also covers the soil and protects against weeds. So I really like that. But if I had to go with a cover crop, I would probably go with these two. I would go with clover. The reason why is it's very easy to turn under. It's very non-invasive. If you catch it early enough before it goes to seed, it basically just turns in and decomposes, which is awesome. And then finally, clover is something that provides a food source for pollinators. And since we love having bees in the garden, it's a great crop to have. You just got to catch it early so it doesn't go back to seed, but it decomposes super fast, gives you lots of nitrogen in the soil and food for pollinators. So that's my first one. And then my second is a cover crop mix. The reason why is because there's lots of reasons why your soil might not have the best quality, and a cover crop mix kind of gives you the most overall bang for your buck. It's going to give you things like your root crops for aeration. It's going to give you biomass to actually generate organic material right where they're growing. It's also going to give you the nitrogen fixers, so it actually fixes nitrogen. Compare that to something like winter rye or sunflowers. They're going to take nitrogen out of the soil. So the things like clover and beans and legumes, those are actually going to give back nitrogen to the soil. So there's going to be kind of a net zero effect on the nitrogen, but the benefit is you're going to get organic matter out of the deal. So it's still a net positive for your soil. It's not just growing something just to grow something and cover the soil. So yeah, and all those as well, all those are very easy to turn under. As long as you catch them early before they go to seed, they're not a big deal and they don't really spread that much. So if I had to pick two, my two favorite would be clover and a cover crop mix. But again, I gave you the full list and the benefits to all of them. If you like one more than another, give it a shot or let me know what your favorite cover crop is down in the comments box down below. And as always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel, reminding you to grow big or go home. I'll catch you all later. See ya. Bye.